A critical analysis of the Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith by Ebony Carberry. Warning. This video may contain the images of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that may be deceased. Number 1. The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, the novel, written by Thomas Keneally in 1972. The novel at its core explores racial discrimination and the frustration of individuals held within that oppressive system. The stereotyping of First Nations Australians, as Keneally romanticises the notion of Aboriginal Australian men as noble savages. The book is written in third person, which allows the readers to experience all of the characters' perspectives, enhancing their likelihood of developing understanding of the context. The novel evidences a paradox, as Jimmy is at once portrayed as a violent savage through his actions, yet the reader is led to understand the pain and suffering that provoke these actions. As the book was written in the time of the events described in the text, we can begin to question how appropriate the subject is to be written by a white man. Number 2. The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, the film, directed by Fred Scapisi in 1978. The film, an adaptation, staying faithful to its original, similarly explores the paradox of the noble savage, through the use of imagery and metaphor. The film allows us to put an image to the language of the text to see visually the harsh reality of black men in Australia around the time of the 1970s. In particular, the struggle of a half-caste man who is trying his very best to become immersed in a very white-dominated society. Now we get to the contentious matter, surrounding the extent to which individuals should be able to write outside of one's own experiences, culture, or issues affecting that culture. This debate is centered upon a grey area that explores the notion of creative license and cultural appropriation. One approach we can use in understanding this is through a phenomenological lens, to analyse the experiences portrayed in the text and in the film. In viewing and reading the two pieces, I have found them to be both an appropriation and adaptation. It is an appropriation in the sense that a translation has occurred, according to its medium. The film has stayed true to its original, the novel. It is an appropriation as we can see clearly the appropriation of the subject and culture of First Nations people. This includes the appropriation of language, traditional law knowledge, and a declaration of war. We can see the clear appropriation through the choice of language. The choice of speech and dialogue demeans the intelligence of First Nations people, as within our own traditional language we were well versed and fluent. At the time of colonisation, we were prohibited to speak our native tongue, thus forced to adapt to English as our second language. It can be also seen when Keneally creates this Aboriginal voice from the fetishism of how white Australians want to imagine an Aboriginal man sounds. It objectifies a person and becomes inauthentic. Furthermore, the subject appropriation of traditional law and initiation ceremony is offensive and disrespectful. This knowledge should remain private and not be shared as public knowledge. It is reflective of the cultural ethics and protocols of my people. It does not pay respects to the very sacred law that my people have held onto for thousands of years. We then begin to question what permissions were given to the author to share this knowledge, and then again to the director in the film. Lastly, looking at both the novel and the film, I found an eerie concept between the two. That is the declaration made by Jimmy justifying his actions of a killing spree, which you can link back to the earlier colonisation of Australia and the mass genocide that happened. This for me is the most important, as it questions the very nature or the integrity of the work, addressing the ideas of white punishment versus black punishment. We see this in the film, again, when an Aboriginal man is taken to prison for killing another white man, which then in turn is hung for that punishment by the police officer without permissions or the proper ways to do so. I think it's fair to say that the Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith is an excellent example of an adaptation and appropriation